I'm here to talk a little bit about back end of the whole network, and the back end here is a little bit towards HF. I'm not really going to talk about the VHF functionality here. I'm going to talk about the HF functionality and what we call the RMS Trimode. And they call it Trimode because it talks 3 different languages. Those languages are, first off, RDOP. It used to be called Winmore, which is now completely deprecated. Nobody uses it anymore. RDOP, which I consider to be very broken. I don't even run it on my Trimode because it kind of sort of doesn't work, and it causes problems on the back end. VARA, which is kind of leaning towards maybe not being completely legal because you can't actually snoop on the protocol, and Jose in Spain doesn't want to listen to anybody to give them the ability to actually look at that protocol. So I consider it to be somewhat questionable, even though I run it because everybody else does. So I'm a little bit ambivalent on whether or not it's legal, but I kind of tend to lean more towards it's not right at this point, and Jose doesn't really want to have anything to do with it. And Pactor 3/4. In the US, we can only run Pactor 3. As Chris mentioned, Pactor 4 is currently illegal unless we get a waiver for a hurricane or something from the FCC. One of the things I want to show you is what's currently running. You want to follow me over here. I'll move these chairs so we can actually see it. This, as of tomorrow, is going to be the WV I can't even remember my own call sign, W0VG Trimode. We've got a Pactor 3 modem sitting right here. We've got a Kenwood TK90 commercial radio in this case. This can run shares and be Part 90 legal. And the power supply down here. And then in the back, all there is a Masters Communications sound card. That Masters Communications sound card does the interface for RDOP and for VARA. And what actually drives this whole thing is the PC. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to step through and learn the interface as to how to quickly set up Trimode to talk to clients on HF. All right, back over here. Okay, so what Trimode is the tool that allows you to pass traffic on the HF bands. This does not do VHF. This is only the HF tool. Trimode currently only runs on Windows, which is somewhat a limitation. You can do most of these things with a whole lot of holding your tongue just right on Linux platform if you spend a whole lot of time to try to make it work. I have not put the time in to do that yet, and I probably don't intend to. I would probably stop running this if I had to try to switch it to Linux. There is a way, which I kind of alluded to before, that we can fail this over to radio with a tool if the internet backup fails, or if internet fails. But I'm not really going to talk about RMS Relay as part of this because it's a whole other can of worms, which I've kind of given up on at this point because it's somewhat flaky. What's required to run it? Really, an HF radio that's controllable via a serial port, a good multi-band antenna, and a good, basically, a sound card interface. That sound card interface is really critical at this point. A newer SignalLink USB is recommended, or like I use the Masters Communications device, which is less money than the SignalLink. It's not in quite as nice a case, but I hear through the grapevine that Masters Communications is going to start supplying replacement boards for your signal link. You can throw the signal link board away and plug the master's communications device in, and it gives you all the functionality of the master's communications unit with the configuration of it. I love that idea. I think it's probably the best of both worlds at that point. The next thing is finding a good computer. It is really a Windows-based tool. So you need a computer that's capable of running Windows in a reasonably speedy fashion. And most of this stuff is processor-based. All of this audio manipulation is being done with the computer. So you don't want a Pentium to try to run this. You want something that has multi-threads, multi-cores, and enough memory that the Windows isn't laggy. At least 4 gig of RAM is a good thing, because running any Windows with less than 4 gig of RAM right now, you're pretty much putting a gun to your head. I would highly recommend, if you're going to run this in Trimode, you have a UPS on it, because things tend to get corrupted when many files are open in a Windows environment if the power fails. And having a laptop is somewhat a good idea. As you can tell, that's what I choose to use, just because there is an internal battery on it. All right, the next thing you've got to do is you've got to get yourself a copy of Trimode. It's very easy to get. Go to winlink.org, grab a copy of it out of the download directory under sysop, and that sysop will list all of the pieces of software which are necessary for you to run a node. There's drivers in there for the PTC modems, which you see right there. That's an old style PTC2, which runs just fine on Pactor 3, and that unit was less than $300 when I bought it. You can get those deals by watching eBay and see when they pop up. I bought a few of them like that. I happen to have a Pactor 4 modem, but it's basically a giant paperweight for Pactor 4, so I wouldn't go spend $1,500 to $2,000 on a Pactor 4 modem yet until the FCC gets off the dime. The modem that I find is the most popular, number one, is Pactor 3 right now. Vara is a very close second, but most of my connects that come on the HF Trimode are coming through Pactor 3. In a month, I usually see 85 connects on Pactor 3. I usually see about 70 to 80 on Vara. And most of those are Vara 2300. A few of them are Vara 500. By far the most on 40 meters. By far the most. I don't know that I would try to run an RMS without the ability to have Pactor 3 on there. And it's really not that expensive to get a Pactor 3 modem if you get a used one. Next thing you've got to do is talk to the folks at Winlink, which is generally Steve Waterman. Steve likes to talk. If you've ever had a conversation with him, make sure you plan an hour to have a phone call with him if you're going to do it. Really nice guy, but he loves to talk. Indicate that you want to run the system full-time, really the requirement for running a Trimode, unless you're doing a special event station for Aries and you're going to run a public station. It needs to be up all the time. It needs to be up 24/7. Yes, the database does get updated regularly, but what you're going to end up having is you may have a station that's up 8 hours a day. If you pull your Winlink information while the station is on the air, he may be off the air when you're trying to actually connect to them. So you need to know that the station that you're trying to connect to is always there. And that's one of the requirements for running a public Winlink station. You tell them that you have an interest in it, and basically you should get approval from him, and they will flip a switch in the system that says that your call sign is allowed to run an RMS gateway. I had a problem. I was running a VHF gateway for a long time, and I started running the Trimode, and it wouldn't work. It kept failing. I was wondering why it was failing. Well, they had something corrupted in their database, and it would not allow the HF station to actually pass data, and they had to go in and refresh something to get it back. So just if you had been running VHF and you switched to HF, you may have a situation like that, just to drop an email to Steve and he'll take care of it. It's pretty straightforward. Once you're set up, go grab a copy of Vara from Jose in Spain. The link is here, rossmodem.wordpress.com. Grab the appropriate HF version. They do update this all the time, so make sure you stay on top of it. I check about once a month, and I usually see an update about once a month. So you want to stay ahead of it because they do deprecate the old stuff really quick. And you may not be able to pass traffic with the folks on the other end because they're staying ahead of it. Once you get it installed, you've got to actually set up Trimode to operate correctly. And bring up Trimode and start out under the Settings tab on the far left side. When you get to Settings, what you're going to do is step down page by page. Every one of those, something you're going to have to touch is in there. So just one at a time, go down the list. First thing you're going to set up is the registration. And in there, the sysop call sign and the password are really the two things that you need to set up. If it's your first time, you'll have to fill this information in. But if it's not your first time, it'll auto-populate the second that you go to the next field. It knows who you are from the database, and it just grabs that information and populates it. If you're running a public station, you're going to have public in the service code. If you're going to run anything else other than that, contact me. I can tell you what needs to go in there, but there's a list of things that you can use in there, but most of the time it's public. The next thing is your grid square. How many of you guys have never heard of a grid square? Okay, good. If you know how to get a grid square, that's a good thing. We are in DM79 here in Denver, but they're going to want to know the next two digits after that. And trying to pull that, you can get it from a map tool, and the link is here if you don't know what it is. Then there's a box below that that says sign-on text optional. If you want to put a little message in there to send to your users when they connect to say, like we do, we have RMS Trimode listed from RMHAM in there just so they knew who it belonged to. Below that is grayed out currently when you first go into the settings. And those settings at the bottom of the page are for RMS relay. And RMS relay is the thing that I said that your mileage may vary, and it's kind of somewhat flaky to try to get it set up properly. If somebody out there knows how to actually make it work so that when the internet fails, it'll actually pass traffic and then go back to normal, I'd love to hear from you. So let me know. The next thing is channels. And this is something that is somewhat a pain in the butt to try to figure out because there's no really good list of where to get channel allocations for HF. And if you put your stuff in the wrong place, you're likely to get a nasty gram from Steve Waterman saying, hey, you put your CMS in the wrong place. Can you go move it? And this information on this screen, I don't know if I have a bigger one here. This screen is the setup channels to scan in RMS Trimode. I would not set up more than probably 5 or 6 channels because you're going to want to do these modes, and every time you click on a checkbox for one of these modes, you actually add time to the scan. And the way Trimode works is it starts on the first channel and it sits there and waits for one of the modems to wake up and say, hey, I got some data here. Does this make sense? It grabs that and it activates a session on whatever mode you're connected to. Now, in my case, for the first one, I've got Pactor 3 and Vara turned on. So it's listening to the Pactor 3 modem and it's listening to the Vara sound card. It's passing that audio from the radio to both of those modems, and it's waiting for one of those to activate and see some valid data. When you add a channel in here and you save down at the bottom with update, that information is posted with channel and mode to the Winlink database the second that you hit update. So if you make a channel change, when you update this screen, that gets pushed to the database at Winlink to be sent out to the clients. Well, if your client has the wrong information and you just change frequencies, they're not going to be able to communicate with you on that channel until they pull a new channel list, which takes a significant amount of time if you've done this. If you've run this on HF in Winlink, you know it takes a lot of time. How many of you have actually done this on HF? It is a very slow process, even across the internet. They let you do it with an email through the Winlink system, but that says that you have to actually connect to a CMS, send the message, wait for the response to be sent back, then go download the response. So it's a two-way problem, and it takes time to download that. It's actually a pretty big download to get that whole database. And it's only as good as the time that you pulled it if the location that you're trying to connect to has made a change to this screen. Now, the next screen is something that took me quite a bit to try to figure out. If you go look at the channel plan for HF, you generally want to be in one of the ACDS, automatically controlled digital system is where you want to be. There are certain things called digital subbands, and that is a very elusive thing. Every time I find the list that says digital subband, it tends to disappear. So what I'd recommend is go find the folks that are on Winlink with the channel list and figure out where they are and stay close to them. If you set it up in here incorrectly in this screen, the system will tell you that you probably should move a little bit either way to stay inside the automatic subband or the automatic controlled system frequencies. So this list, which is available on the RMHAM website under course syllabus, you can find all of the presentations for today listed there, and this one happens to be there. If you're trying to set it up, having these frequencies is really important to try to be able to set this up properly. The next thing you want to do is very likely be able to control your radio directly, because it can't scan if you can't control the radio. So you need to have a serial interface for your radio that actually allows you to toggle things in there. The radio that this one is running on is an FT450, and that's the system that's actually up right now. The FT450 has a serial port on the back side of it. It's actually a true 9-pin serial port. So as long as you can get that into your computer, which is very hard to do these days, you can actually talk to the radio. Then you just need to get the configuration right. I spent a lot of time with Ham Radio Deluxe trying to make sure that the radio actually works properly. And if you have a copy of Ham Radio Deluxe, it'll help you get this stuff set up to make sure that you can actually talk to it. Baud rate is an important thing. Always use USB on this Winlink stuff regardless. You know, there's a gentleman's agreement out there that you're using lower sideband below 40 or 40 meters and below. Don't listen to that. With this stuff, stay on the same mode, USB. As long as you're on upper sideband, you're good. Make sure you get your baud rate and your serial port correct for the radio, and request to send and data terminal ready, which probably doesn't mean anything to most folks in here unless you grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Leave those toggled. And then you can do antenna switching with this across a serial port. So they give you a way to toggle the data terminal ready to toggle an antenna switch. So if you're going to switch bands and you need to switch antennas, you can do it automatically with this tool with a checkbox. If you look in here, on the far right-hand side, it says ANT right here, which is a little bit fuzzy on this because of the downsampling through the system. That antenna switch will allow you to switch between, say you had a vertical that did 80 meters or a vertical that did 40 meters, just by going to that frequency. It'll switch the antenna switch. Makes it pretty straightforward. The next thing in the list is going to be your Pactor 3 or 4 modem. And you choose at the top with the radio box which one you're going to be using. In this case, that unit has a Pactor 3 modem. It's a PTC2. And you just need to set the baud rate and the serial port. Everything else pretty much works out of the box. Like we said, Pactor 4 is not legal in the US, so if you've got one of the new Dragon modems, make sure you have it set to Pactor 3. When you choose that, it will give you the option to pick Pactor 3 only. Then the next thing, which is a little bit funky for RDOP and VARA, you actually have to set up which sound card the driver is talking to. And once you get VARA running, it'll bring up an icon on the taskbar down at the bottom of the Windows screen. Bring it up, and then click on, I think it's Setup Sound Card, and then you're going to get this, this little window which says Device Input and Device Output. Choose the proper sound card device. If you notice this one, it says USB audio codec. That is the default name for a signal link. The master's communications is a different name, and therefore it's going to be a different device that you're going to choose here. If you don't have that correct, it's not going to work, and you need to do this for both VARA and for RDOP if you're going to use RDOP. It sets up exactly the same way. You go in and configure the sound card, and once you save it, it will remember it. Unless you have my RMS, and I can't configure RDOT because it won't take those settings for some reason, even if I hand code it. Once you have the sound card configured, this is what the screen looks like when Trimode comes up and runs. And in my case, it shows robust packet W0VG listening for connection, Pactor 3, W0VG listening for a connection, and VARA 2300. You'll notice down at the bottom where the yellow is that it says RDOP is disabled. I've had some pretty egghead people look at this system to try to figure out why RDOP doesn't work, and they don't know. So I just shut it off. It's best solution. It's kind of duct tape and baling wire in between. Pactor 3 and VARA, things just work. Once you get your listening, as long as you're on a good antenna, you should be talking to the world. Your information has already been published to the Winlink database from when you created your setup channels to scan. Then you just got to sit back and wait, see what happens. The proper way to configure your radio and the sound card for all of this is literally parallel. The radio, transmit audio, receive audio, push to talk, and ground get wide to the radios. There's nothing tricky about it. There's no distribution amplifier. It's just one to many. So if you have a SCS modem and a sound card, the receive audio goes to both places, the transmit audio goes to both places, the push to talk goes to both places, and the ground goes to both places. It's not rocket science. It's shared audio, shared push to talk, shared transmit audio between all of them. You wouldn't think that would work, but it does. It doesn't. I came from the broadcast business, and I know Mike Pappas is the same thing, and everything we did had to be buffered. In this case, I tried it. It was worse. So I just tried the Y, and this works just fine. I know Mark had a question as how you actually hook it up. It's not rocket science. There's literally a DB9 Y cable inside that box. And the audio comes into the Y cable and splits and goes to both devices. The impedance is probably completely whacked, but it works. Mine too. All right, I talked about this at length. If you guys figure out how to do RMS relay, let me know, w0vg@arrl.net. Is it net? Org? Net. I'm not an orger, thank God. I don't have enough time for that. RMS Relay gives you the ability to do a local post office so that if the internet happens to go down, you can receive messages for the local folks and they can pick them up from your system. It's very, very low tech. It literally is a dump it to the mailbox and you go grab it with the same call sign. And it's very reliable. RMS Relay is supposed to allow you to do failover if the internet goes down, but I can never seem to get it to fail back the proper way when the internet fails. It keeps sending messages with the HF, and I have never felt a PA on a radio get so hot as when I had that configured. So I'd probably be running a commercial radio if it was me, which I am. I'm running the TK90 over there. That's going to become installed tomorrow, and that's going to become the new Trimode. I'd like to have my Podcom back, and that's what's running the RMS right now. It's been in there for about 5 years, and I'd like to have it back. Any questions anybody's got? Want to know how this thing works, what it does, what it doesn't do? Mark's got a question. You grab the microphone. Nobody has any questions.